Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm Jamie, that's Heath, that's Adam. We like to give you a little sample on Fridays of some of the games that we expect to be high scoring that can not only help your redraft seasonal leagues, but also give you some DFS plays. And there are 3 games that we're going to look at right now that I think could be potentially very high scoring. Let's start in Seattle, where you got the Titans coming off a disappointing week 1, taking on a Seahawks team that was awesome in week 1 at the Colts. Hopefully the Titans play a little bit better and the Seahawks stay hot. Let's start with the Titans and talk about their rebound potential. So Heath, when you look at Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill, not great. Derrick Henry, miserable. Julio Jones, probably should have stayed in Atlanta. Now A.J. Brown scored, but bad all the way around. Which of those guys have rebound potential to the point where you feel absolutely confident and you would also play them on either FanDuel or DraftKings?
Well, in terms of a redraft league, absolutely confident. I'm starting Derrick Henry without any question, thought, or doubt about it. Same thing with A.J. Brown. That's pretty much the extent of it. I'm a little bit worried about Ryan Tannehill. He's still a top 15 quarterback, but there are a couple of streamers, Ben Roethlisberger and Teddy Bridgewater, that I would start over him this week. I'm concerned about how unable the Titans were to protect him at all. And then Julio Jones just had 6 targets in that game. So I'm a little bit worried about him. He didn't look quite like the old Julio Jones. I'm still probably starting him as a low-end number 2. In terms of DFS, these guys for me are contrarian plays only, but A.J. Brown would be my favorite.
All right, so play A.J. Brown. You see his pricing there on DraftKings and FanDuel. Again, he did score. The one thing that I'm hopeful for is you had Taylor Lewan coming off the knee injury from last year. You had all these guys missing time during training camp in the preseason. Tannehill was on the COVID list. A.J. Brown had, recovering from his knee surgery. Julio Jones out for a month with the leg injury. Hopefully they knock the rust off and they can play better at Seattle. And Vegas is telling you at least that they expect this game to be high scoring. It could be mostly because of the Seattle side of things. As we saw last week, the Titans defense could not stop the Arizona Cardinals. We'll see if the Seahawks can do what they did to the Colts against the Titans this week. So Adam, when you look at the Seattle side of things, how excited are you about Russell Wilson, who you said could be an MVP candidate this year, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Chris Carson carrying over the week 1 performance to week 2 against Tennessee?
I think they're all great plays. Lockett's a little bit too expensive for me in DraftKings. He's being treated like a 2nd-round pick basically in fantasy. He's more expensive than A.J. Brown. It might happen, but I'm not quite there yet, so I'm avoiding him. But let's not forget, each of the last 2 seasons, Russell Wilson, first half Russell Wilson is MVP, best quarterback in fantasy. So he's the 2nd most expensive quarterback on DraftKings, but well behind Kyler Murray. And honestly, it makes sense. Patrick Mahomes isn't in the mix. Aaron Rodgers is not in the mix. Daniel Jones is not in the mix. So I think fun to spend on Russell Wilson. Chris Carson's very safe. He's not a huge upside play. I usually don't play him in DFS unless he's a really good value, but yeah, he's safe and has a high floor. So I think 3 of those 4 look good to me. Tyler Lockett, a little bit too expensive for me on DraftKings. Plus, he's got the curse of the 100-yard game. Every time he has 100 yards, he does pretty badly the next week. We'll see if that happens again. If it does, I probably won't take it seriously, but I'll laugh about it. I'll start specifically Wilson and Metcalf just like I did last week, and it worked well enough.
It certainly did from the Wilson side of things. Metcalf did find the end zone, but it was Tyler Lockett with the 2 scores. So hopefully we see we had 2 receivers against the Titans go for multiple touchdowns last week with DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk. So maybe we see the same thing for a pair of Seattle wide receivers as well. Let's transition now to another game that might be one-sided, but again, the score is expected to be high between the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Adam, we'll start with the Falcons. You saw very, very disappointing performances across the board from Matt Ryan, from Mike Davis, Calvin Ridley, and obviously Kyle Pitts. Is there rebound potential here as they take on a good Bucs defense? But we saw specifically from the pass catchers last week as they took on Dallas, they struggled with that secondary, especially when Sean Murphy-Bunting went out with that elbow injury.
Matt Ryan faced Tampa Bay twice last season, obviously, and both times without Julio Jones. And he scored 33 points and 26 points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. But he did throw 49 and 44 times. So we need to see that he's going to throw the ball. We need to see what this offense is going to be like. Are they going to go all Dirk Cutter on us and throw the football a lot if they have to? They're going to have to score some points in this game. Their defense is not going to hold up. I think Matt Ryan is a pretty nice contrarian play and a pretty nice gamble if you want to save some money on DFS. I still have no issues with Calvin Ridley. I think he should be fine. Russell Gage is really interesting to me. If they get back to throwing the football in the 40s, like they should, like Dak Prescott did last week, then Gage, I mean, he's nobody wants Russell Gage, right? He had 2 targets last week. He had 2 very good games against the Bucs last year. The Bucs secondary isn't so good right now. So I'd look to him. I'm not necessarily targeting Falcons, certainly not Mike Davis, but I could see a good case for trying to save some money and look at Matt Ryan and Russell Gage.
All right, so very interesting plays there. Ryan would probably be a little more popular than Russell Gage, but that's a great call if in fact he does come through. He's really cheap, and look, a lot of people in redraft leagues were dropping him, understandably so, because he was so uninvolved last week. But might want to be a guy if you're in a 14-team league or 16-team league. See if he's out there, a beat the waiver wire type of guy. All right, the team that was incredibly hot last week. We talked about the running backs already. So Bruce Arians saying that they're all three in play, so we're probably going to avoid them. But the pass catchers, Heath, are clearly very, very popular for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady was awesome last week. Godwin, Antonio Brown, they were stars. Gronk, 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys. Mike Evans was a little bit disappointing. Does he bounce back, and how does that all work with the other receivers there, receiving options there for Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure that Mike Evans is going to bounce back, but I do like I think when you look at the pricing here, it's really going to depend on what site you're playing on. I'm going to have a hard time paying $8,000 for Chris Godwin on FanDuel when you can get Evans for $6,700, Brown for $6,400. I think all of them are in play on DraftKings where they're all within $600 of each other. The other thing is the tight end. Rob Gronkowski's price went up too fast, too soon for me on FanDuel, but $4,700 on DraftKings, I don't mind that at all. This should be one of the most popular options to stack. If you want to go contrarian, I think what you do is you go with Leonard Fournette, because I do still think he's the most likely guy to lead this team in fantasy points. If Atlanta just doesn't keep up, maybe we get a game. We've talked, even when we thought Ronald Jones was starting, Pete Prisco told us Leonard Fournette would be the finisher. If we get a game where the Falcons just don't score like they did last week, and it's 32-6 in the fourth quarter, Fournette might get 10 carries in the fourth quarter and just run all over this team. So I like Fournette as a contrarian play, and the wide receivers are more dependent on what site you're on. Tom Brady's a great play regardless.
Yep, that's a good call. We'll see if Fournette is the leader in touches for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All it takes is one Ronald Jones fumble, and we can see Leonard Fournette just dominating for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their backfield, especially if Giovanni Bernard does not play as much as he did last week. The next game we're looking at here, I'm really excited to see. You got the Dallas Cowboys coming off that Thursday night loss against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Chargers coming off an impressive road win in Washington. You see what the over-under total is expected to be here, 55 points. That might go over by a lot, depending on how bad this Dallas defense is without DeMarcus Lawrence. Randy Gregory could be bad all the way around. And the Chargers, look, they're going to have a hard time, as good as their defense looks, stopping the Dallas Cowboys. So, Heath, I'll give you the Dallas side of things here. Again, another team that has a really impressive pass-catching group, even without Michael Gallup there. You got Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb. But what about Ezekiel Elliott? Is there bounce-back potential here against the Chargers?
There's some bounce back potential. I mean, the thing you like about this game is a lot of times when we get an over under as high as this at 55, it's a game where it's a blowout. It's a Chiefs game where they're favored by 2 touchdowns, or it's a Buccaneers game where they're favored by 2 touchdowns. Here we got a 3.5 point spread. This one should stay close. Neither team should fall behind enough to where they just don't run the ball. Neither team has the type of run defense where that would happen either, like what happened with Elliott. So I do think he's a decent bounce back candidate. Again, it's kind of a price situation. I don't see him as a good enough value to where he's one of my real targets. This is the game that I will stack both sides of on a majority of my lineups. Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb will be 3 of my highest rostered players, and the other 3 will be on the Chargers side.
Yep, it's got a lot of chance to be a lot of fun, especially if the Chargers offense plays a little bit better than what it did last week. Specifically, more passing to Austin Eckler and more production for Justin Herbert. But the receivers were impressive with what Keenan Allen and Mike Williams did against the Washington football team. So, Adam, talk about the Chargers. Which guys you're interested in playing this week, and factor in Jared Cook as well, who had a strong week 1 against Washington also.
There is nobody, as I look at DraftKings pricing at least, that I would avoid on the Chargers. Nobody that I think is too expensive. I think there's a lot of running back value, and Eckler's one of the more expensive guys, so I probably won't go with Eckler just to save some money. But I just love it. I love the setup. Heath mentioned it, high over under and a low spread. So this should be a back and forth shootout. And I'm not saying there's great value here. I mean, Mike Williams is not exactly cheap this week, but all of these guys could return their investment. And Jared Cook is definitely a value type of play. You know, he had the targets last week. I don't know what to make of the Cowboys being terrible against Rob Gronkowski. Jared Cook's not quite Rob Gronkowski, but they are not going to be good on defense, and they might have rookie linebackers or a rookie linebacker trying to cover Jared Cook at times, so you could take advantage of that. I think Cook is the guy you go for if you want to save a little bit of money, but yeah, definitely this is going to be a popular game, and you'll see later when I tell you my DraftKings lineup, I'm all about stacking the Cowboys as well, and you're going to want to get some Chargers in there too.
Yep, it's going to be fun to see how many people have the Chargers and the Cowboys in their lineups. As Heath told you, he's going to have a lot of those guys. Adam's going to have a lot of those guys. I'll have my share as well. Want more of the Fantasy Football Today podcast and nonstop year-round fantasy advice? It's simple. Hit the subscribe button and hang with us all throughout the year.